Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Bradnam, and I'm the chair of this committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the Joint Development Control Committee meeting taking place at 10 a.m. on Monday, the 30th of October 2023. So I'd like to introduce the other members of the committee. So going around, firstly, Cambridge City Council members. So Councillor Bagent.
Yeah, I'm Dave Bagent, currently representing Labour in Romsey.
Thank you. Councillor Flaubert.
I am Councillor Flaubert, representing Trumpington.
Thank you. Councillor Porra.
I'm Councillor Katie Porra, representing Market Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Yep, present.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Thornborough.
Present.
Thank you. And introducing members from South Cambs District Council. So I represent Milton and Waterbeach Ward. So Councillor Khan.
Hello, Councillor Khan, representing Histon and Impington Ward.
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Fain, but Councillor Garvey.
Yes, I'm a councillor for Girton, Drydrayton, Madingley and part of Eddington.
Thank you. And Councillor Hawkins.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Toomey Hawkins, Caldecott Ward.
Thank you. And we also have apologies from Councillor Richard Williams from South Cambs. But we are quorate members. So we'll move on to agenda item 1. We've already mentioned apologies have been received from Councillors Fain and Williams, but we also have apologies from Councillor Richard Stobart, and Councillor Garvey is attending as his alternate. So the officers permanently at the table are, would you like to introduce yourselves? Philippa Kelly.
Good morning, everyone. Philippa Kelly, Strategic Sites Manager, Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service.
Thank you. And Keith Barber.
Good morning, Keith Barber, planning lawyer.
Thank you. And our committee manager.
Morning, Sarah Steed.
Thank you. And Claire.
Good morning, I'm the meeting producer.
Thank you. And that's Claire Tunnicliffe. Thank you very much to them for managing the administration and production of the meeting. So, housekeeping members. So copies of the agenda can be found on the City Council website under committee meetings, minutes and agendas. Please, members, when you refer to an item in the agenda, do refer to page and paragraph numbers, which is helpful to all of us. Please can those present in the council chamber note that everything on your desk or your laptop screen may be broadcast at some point, and also to allow time for the camera to follow your microphone before speaking. So allow a few minutes and then, a few seconds, but also please raise your hand if you wish to speak and I will endeavour to pick up those requests. For those, do we have anybody participating on the screen? No? Right. So then the process for consideration of the planning application will be that the planning case officer, just one moment. We also have members of the Environment Agency, obviously, and the agents here, but I'll introduce them as their time comes. Thank you. So the order of business will be that the planning case officer will present the proposals and give an overview of the key issues as set out in the report. Registered public speakers will be invited to have their say. There will be 3 minutes for those speaking in support first, and then 3 minutes for those any speaking against, unless I have advised otherwise. The committee manager will ring a bell when the 3-minute time period has passed, and I will invite the speakers to close at that point. And public speakers are not normally able to join in the council debate, but I will in this case ask Environment Agency to speak, to give a brief presentation of the background and answer any questions that we have. The committee will discuss and debate the item and may ask questions of the case officer only. At the end of the deliberation, I'll ask members to vote on the officer's recommendation by show of hands. So, moving to agenda item 2, please could members advise if they have any declarations of interest on this item? Councillor Khan.
Part of the area is within my ward. I have my wife is a member of the Community Land Trust in Histon and Impington, and I have been in discussion about the derelict farmhouse at Impington Farm, about possibilities of alternative use. But I come to this matter afresh.
Thank you very much, Councillor Khan. Councillor Thornborough.
I'm a member of CAM Conservators, and also 4 years ago I called a forum to discuss the water crisis situation, and also the City Council is a member of Water Resources East, and I'm the elected member who attends on behalf of Cambridge City Council, but I'm come to this planning application afresh. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you for Councillor Bajent.
Member of Camcycle.
Thank you very much. And since Councillor Thornborough has reminded me, I will declare that I am also, in fact, I'm the Deputy Chair of the Conservators of the River Cam, and I was also on the panel that Councillor Thornborough convened to discuss water resources, but like her, I come to this planning application afresh. So we come to the application, which is 22-02528/OUT, Darwin Green, Phases 2 and 3 development site, Cambridge Road, Impington. So please could... Sorry. Oh, sorry. Councillor Smart.
Thanks, Chair. So I presume we've all had a look through the report, and particularly 27.1, so recommendation. So I'm not quite clear, do we need to debate this item or should we go straight to the vote? I'm not necessarily proposing we go straight to the vote, but I'm just unclear if the recommendation is that, well, you can read it yourself at 27.1. It seems to me that we don't need to debate the item.
Councillor Smart, I'm sure the application would not have been brought to this committee if debate was not worthwhile. So, Philippa Kelly, would you like to speak?
Through you, Chair. I think members do need to debate and come to a structured decision on the recommendation in the interests of transparency, because at the end of the day, what you are resolving to do is to give officers the instructions to go away on that ground for appeal as things currently stand. And I think the case officer may have some updates since the report was circulated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barber. So, we look forward to the Principal Planner, Guy Wilson, introducing the item. Thank you, Guy.
Thank you, Chair. So, as you said, this is an outline application for up to 1,000 houses, a secondary school, primary school, community facilities, retail uses, open space, landscape areas, and other associated works at Darwin Green, Darwin Green Phase 2 and 3 on Cambridge Road, Impington. So in terms of amendments, there's an amendment sheet has been circulated, which proposes an additional condition. This relates to the demolition of the existing buildings on the site and seeks to adopt a strategy for the retention.
Yes. So can I ask if you imagine you're speaking to the people outside the wall? Thank you, Guy.
So this additional condition seeks to adopt a strategy to review the potential to retain any of the existing buildings for uses associated with the country park. And there's also a further additional amendment to the recommendation. This is to add an additional limb to the recommendation to delegate to officers in consultation with the chair and vice chair to settle a scheme of measures providing for and delivering enhanced water saving and other appropriate mitigation and any appropriate sort of conditions to support the secure delivery of that scheme, to address the sort of reason for refusal. And I'll cover that more at the end of my presentation. So to outline the site, the site is outlined in red here. You can see, and then the dotted red line shows the extent of the site allocation policy for Darwin Green 2 and 3. And then the area outlined in blue to the south is Darwin Green 1, which is in the same ownership as and there's also a small area of land on the western side of the site, which is in the same ownership, which doesn't form part of the application site. To provide context to the locations of the site, you can see the site shaded here in red. That is bounded by the A14 to the north. We've got Cambridge Road to the east, and then Darwin Green site to the south, with areas of Girton to the west. There's two public footpaths which run past the site. So there's footpath 9910, which runs along sort of the southern boundary of the site, and then footpath 9913, which joins footpath 9910 and then exits onto Forton Close. I've highlighted some of the key connections here as well. So you've got Forton Close, which is just to the west. You've got Forton Way to the north of that, and then you've got Welbrook Way, again, just to the northwest of the site. And then there's also an existing farm bridge over the A14, which I've highlighted here. And then again, just for context, this just shows some of the nearest developments within Darwin Green 1. So the top left picture here shows some sort of apartment buildings at the western end of Darwin Green 1. You can see sort of the viewpoint, the sort of blue arrow in the corner here. And then the bottom picture here shows apartments again under construction on the eastern end of the Darwin Green 1 site. So you can see these generally sort of 3 to 4 stories. This just shows this just shows footpath 9910, which is the sort of long footpath along the sort of southern boundary of the site. So the right-hand photo shows the sort of western side end of this footpath. So you can see it's quite enclosed by trees and hedging, and then bottom left shows the sort of central section of the footpath, and you can see it's more open with views across the site to the north. And then here's a view into the site from footpath 9910. So this taken from sort of the centre of that sort of footpath. You can see it's generally sort of open agricultural land with a number of tree belts. And you can sort of just about make out the A14 in the background there. And there's 2 buildings there, which some of the existing buildings within the site. And then just another photograph again, looking over the site from further east along the footpath. You can see some of the sort of trees within the site, and on the left of this photograph as well, you can see houses within sort of Girton in the distance as well. And then this photograph just shows the view from footpath 9913 with the site on the right. So you can see sort of fairly open agricultural land, and again with the A14 in the background. This photograph shows the existing connection to Forton Close. So it's a existing footpath which connects them to the road. And then you've got the site kind of behind the fence here. Then Thornton Way, so you can see the road terminates by the site boundary, and there's a hedging and there's a ditch behind that as well, which you can't see in the photograph. And then this shows the Eastern Access Road, which was previously part of Darwin Green 1 and be shared by the development. So it's kind of recently constructed. You can see sort of view from the sort of footpath, kind of looking at the access road, and then just the junction with Cambridge Road at the bottom right. This just shows some of the existing buildings within the site. So you've got there's two farmhouses, there's a farmhouse and another dwelling, so Orchard Close and Woodhouse Farm, which are sort of at the northern end of the site. You can see again, the arrow shows their location. And then Impington Farm, which is in sort of the northeast corner of the site. And you can see sort of this is part of the sort of protected woodland as well. Next to the Impington Farm, you can see the sort of the existing farm buildings here. And then this is in the southwest corner of the site. So this is the Naiad Farm buildings. Again, the arrow kind of indicating the indication of this photograph. You can see the sort of the footpath which runs along here as well, and the sort of wider sort of green corridor which is being delivered. It's currently under construction as part of the Darwin Green 1 site. So moving on to the parameter plans. So this shows this is demolition parameter plans. So the buildings sort of outlined in sort of highlighted in red to be potentially demolished. So that's that's Impington Farm, Woodhouse Farm, Orchard House, sorry, and the Naiad Farm as well. And then moving on to the land use parameter plan. So this shows the land use is proposed. So you've got the country park in the retained green belt in sort of light green. You've got the development parcels in grey, the green corridors and movement corridors in sort of darker green, with the primary and sort of secondary routes indicated in sort of the kind of the browny sort of beigey colour. Then you've got the proposed secondary school in sort of pink in the southwest of the site, and the primary school in purple above that. And then the sports pitches and allotments shaded with blue, again in sort of southwest. And there's also, just where the pointer is here, there's the grey hatching shows the mixed use area for the community building and retail use. Moving on to movement and access parameters. So you can see here the site will use the sort of the primary access route delivered as part of the Darwin Green 1 development, connecting to Cambridge Road in the east, and then vehicle access through the west as well will be through the Darwin Green 1 site. And you can see there's connections indicated where these sort of red arrows are. The existing footpaths are shown in sort of dark blue here, and you can also see there's slightly lighter blue. It's a sort of a proposed footpath which is being delivered as part of the Darwin Green 1. Footpath and cycleway which is being delivered as part of the Darwin Green 1 development, which runs between the two sites, and which the site will connect into. You can see the proposed sort of primary sort of loop road through the site in orange, with cycle lanes and footways indicated alongside it. Routes through the country park are also indicated here. So this is connections sort of detailed more in the report, but just to run through these. So you've got the Thornton Close link here, which is where the existing footpath connects into, and it's proposed that a pedestrian link will be provided at that point. It's also proposed to deliver a a sort of a pedestrian cycle link into Thornton Way at this point here as well. And then there's also indicated potential future connections into Wellbrook Way. The challenge of that site, that one, is that the land beyond this is in sort of third-party ownership, and Wellbrook Way is not an adopted sort of adopted highway as well. So because of that, through discussions with the county council and the applicant, it's not considered possible to deliver that at this stage. And then there's the connection as well, potential future connection indicated across the A14 bridge. Again, that uses, that goes into sort of third-party land, into sort of farmland to the north, and again, it's not considered possible to deliver that connection at this stage as well. So moving on to the landscape framework parameter plan, this kind of adds a bit more detail into the sort of country park and sort of landscaping within the site, the developer area of the site as well. So you can see along the northern boundary there are proposed to be sort of bunding and tree planting to screen the site from the A14 and reduce noise. You can see the existing sort of woodlands to be retained, shown sort of in sort of dark green, and you can see also sort of attenuation features shown in blue as well along the sort of northern part of the site. And then again in the southwest you can see the sports pitches, allotments, and a community orchard, which are proposed to be delivered. And then sort of within through the development site, these sort of green corridors, which will link from Darwin Green 1 up through the site and into the country park. The location of sort of play spaces places is also indicated in this plan, sort of shown with the sort of the brown and orange and yellow dots. And you can see they're proposed to be sort of located throughout the development, also within the country park. Moving on to building heights, this shows that sort of we're in sites for 3 different sort of heights proposed towards the main sort of corridors around the sort of primary sort of movement corridor. Heights of up to 4 stories are proposed, and that's heights of up to 60 metres. And that'll also kind of face onto the kind of green corridor, which separates the site from Darwin Green 1. Then sort of heights of up to 3 stories are proposed, including facing onto the country park and other routes. And then sort of within development parcels, heights of up to 2.5 stories proposed. And then for the non-residential, for the schools, heights of up to 3 stories proposed, and again that's 60 metres. Just for context as well, this plan shows the parameter plan parameters for the neighbouring Darwin Green development. So that shows the sort of dark blue is heights of up to 4 stories, the red is heights of up to 3 stories, and then the light blue is heights of up to 2 stories. And then there's the urban design parameter plan, which provides a bit more detail on the sort of the proposed arrangement of the development. You can see the kind of the development parcels and the sort of movement corridors with the sort of primary routes, secondary routes, and also the indicated sort of tertiary routes for the individual development parcels. This also shows sort of the hierarchy of frontages with the sort of country park frontages, so the primary road frontages, and green corridor frontages sort of highlighted. So that's blue for the country park, the black for the primary route, and then the brown frontages shown with the red. And this plan also shows sort of key view corridors and important sort of significant locations throughout development. And this will kind of be developed further through the design code process and also at the reserve matter stage. And then this plan shows the illustrative master plan, which brings together those parameter plans and shows how the site is likely to be developed. So you can sort of see some of the detail of the country part there, and also the development parcels and green corridors for the site. So the report sets out assessment of the application. So just to summarise the kind of key points, so it's up to 1,000 dwellings, including 40% affordable housing, a range of tenures and types of housing proposed, including custom build and self-build housing, as well as accessible housing built to M42 and M43. 6 form-entry secondary school and 2 form-entry primary school proposed, and community buildings and retail provision. Extensive country park, including amenity open space allotments and sports facilities, a good network of pedestrian cycle links through the site, as well as connections to the surrounding area. A bus service is to be provided through the site, which will extend the service which is being provided through Durham Green 1. The National Highways and the County Council, as Transport Authority and Local Housing Authority, have viewed the site and satisfied that there's adequate highways capacity in the vicinity of the site and that the transport impacts of the development are acceptable. There's a surface water drainage scheme which is designed to accommodate a 1 in 100 year event with a 40% climate change allowance, and again is considered acceptable by the local flood authority. Noise mitigation measures are proposed to reduce the impact of some noise from the A14, including sort of bunding and tree planting. In relation to sustainability, dwellings are proposed to be built to the Future Home Standard, and community buildings are proposed to be built to BREEAM Excellent, with the schools built to at least very good, with an aspiration to achieve BREEAM Excellent. The development will be gas-free, and in relation to biodiversity, an anticipated sort of biodiversity net gain of 19% is expected. And also there's no inappropriate development within the green belt. So as set out in the report, the development is considered to comply with the key allocation policy, SS2, and majority of policies within the local plan. The key issue, however, is in relation to water resources. So the Environment Agency have raised an objection to the application in February 2023, and they identified a risk of ecological deterioration to a number of water bodies in the area, and that sort of a protection licence cap proposed in response will result in less water being available than assumed under the existing water resources management plan, which makes some growth in the current local plans unsustainable. The appellant responded to this with a water resources addendum to the environmental statement, which the EA has considered, and the EA sort of don't agree with the applicant's position, and they maintain their objection that it hasn't been demonstrated that the development can be sustainably supplied, and that the risks can be mitigated. And as a consequence, the application would be in conflict with policy CC7 of the South Cambridgeshire local plan, which requires development proposals to ensure that water bodies are not harmed and opportunities are taken to improve water quality. And on that basis, the application is recommended for refusal with a single reason for refusal, which is shown here. So that says that the application has failed to demonstrate that water development can be supplied sustainably and would not cause harm to the environment by reason of impacts on groundwater bodies, including chalk aquifers. In the absence of adequate mitigation measures and the site-wide water efficiency measures, development is considered to be unacceptable, and the proposal therefore contrary to policy CC7 or the South Cambridgeshire local plan. And then limb B of the recommendation is that it's for members to delegate authority to officers to negotiate, settle and complete the Section 106 agreement and to agree the wording of any planning conditions which are applied in the event an appeal is allowed in general accordance with the heads of terms and draft conditions included at Appendix 6 and 7 or with the additional condition set out in the amendment sheet as well. And then go back to the additional amendment to the recommendation. So this is to add a further limb to the recommendation to delegate officers in consultation with the chair and vice chair to settle a scheme of measures to provide enhanced water saving and other appropriate mitigation to address the reason for refusal in sort of set out in part A of the recommendation. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Guy. Just one clarification. On about 3 slides back, you talked about the conditions. I just wanted to clarify that you said it was going to a target of BREEAM excellent with a stretched target, and I think you meant a BREEAM outstanding. Down at the 4th bullet point from the bottom.
Yeah, I think that's for the schools, I think.
Schools to a stretched target. Okay, right, sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Guy, for your presentation. So now we turn to the public speakers. So the first is Alison Wright, who's the agent speaking on behalf of the appellant, which is, of course, Barratt Homes. So would you like to come to the speaker's position? So you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Also wish to thank the officer for a very comprehensive report. The site is allocated for a sustainable housing-led urban extension of Cambridge of approximately 1,000 dwellings, with associated open space provision and community facilities. This is a significant number of new homes which will help maintain the Greater Cambridge 5-year housing land supply and deliver affordable homes. It is noted that the officer report confirms that significant positive weight is attached to the social benefits, the economic benefits, and the environmental benefits arising from the development proposals. It is noted at paragraph 12.18 of the report that notwithstanding that the Welbeck Way and E14 bridge connections are unlikely to be deliverable, the proposed access arrangements and site layout will ensure the site is permeable and well connected with high quality active travel and public transport routes through the development itself and into the surrounding area. The reference later in the report at paragraph 26.5 to the lack of access through Welbeck Way being a disbenefit that attracts moderate weight in the planning balance is therefore disappointing, but the appellant and the local planning authority are working constructively to progress and agree the wording of conditions and Section 106 obligations in relation to pedestrian and cycle links to Thornton Way and Thornton Close. It is also noted that significant weight is attached to the potential harm to water bodies from potable water demand. This is equally disappointing, but again, I must stress the appellant and the local planning authority are working constructively with a view to progressing and agreeing appropriately worded conditions to secure a suitable mitigation package. We're therefore confident that this can be resolved before the inquiry opens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wright. So now we'd like to invite the Environment Agency to speak. We have James Bax, who's the Water Resources Programme Manager, Liam Robson, who's the Planning Specialist, and Ian Page, the Water Resources Specialist. And I'll leave it to you to decide which of you speak for. Just one moment, though. So in principle, you have 3 minutes, but depending on how things go, I might give you some discretion. Thank you. You go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm James Bax, and I'll just give a brief introduction and outline of the Environment Agency's position in respect of this matter. I'll start by just saying that water is a precious resource and is under pressure across the whole of the country. However, these pressures are being felt first and foremost within Cambridge and East Anglia area, and it is a matter of increased abstraction which is presenting a real risk to our chalk streams, rivers and wetland habitats. For the benefit of the committee, if I may just first outline the duties of the Environment Agency to protect the environment and regulate industry. So the Environment Agency has a duty to protect the environment and ensure that there is enough water for people, businesses and the environment. The Environment Agency regulate the abstraction and impoundment of water, and we work with water companies, farmers, industry and businesses to ensure that that water is made available. We also have a legal duty to secure the proper and efficient use of water resources, and this is under Regulation 33 of the Water Framework Directive, and in doing so, where necessary, we must take action to prevent deterioration. The Environment Agency will act and have acted in this case where planned developments are not sustainable and risk harm to the environment under Regulation 33 of said Act. However, I should stress that the solutions and mitigation will be led by the Local Planning Authority and Cambridge Water Company, not the Environment Agency. We have objected to this development on the grounds that it will increase abstraction and have an associated risk, increased risk of deterioration to water bodies within the Greater Cambridgeshire area. The grounds for our objection are that the water supply demands for this development, both alone and in combination with other proposed development, pose a significant risk of deterioration to Water Framework Directive designated water bodies. Furthermore, the Environment Agency have raised significant concerns regarding Cambridge Water Company's ability to meet the demand for water in its supply area without increasing the risk of deterioration to the status of water bodies, which we consider to be of direct relevance to this matter. Cambridge Water Company are already abstracting to unsustainable levels in some cases, the capped levels, particularly on its licences. The Environment Agency have raised concerns regarding Cambridge Water Company's water resource management plan with the company through our letter of representation earlier this year. In summary, the Environment Agency's best available evidence demonstrates that the environment is under pressure from abstraction currently and in a precarious condition, and therefore a result of any additional development and the associated increases in abstraction will exceed the environmental limits until new strategic solutions and the ones which are more sustainable can be delivered.
Very much. You finished exactly on time. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for a very clear exposition of the circumstances that we're in, Mr. Bax. Do any members have any questions for the Environment Agency? Councillor Hawkins, Councillor Khan, Councillor Thornborough, Councillor Bajent, and Councillor Smart. Sorry, can we just get them in order? So Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bax, for your statement this morning. You have admitted that there is a challenge that we face, but you also said that the solutions and the mitigations to this challenge are to be led by the local planning authority and Cambridge Water. I find that a bit off, I must admit. What is the local planning authority's responsibility here? Why are you saying that it is down to us to provide the solution and the mitigation? Can you clarify?
Yes, certainly. I state that insofar as outlining the Environment Agency's role as a regulator. So I'm not I'm not suggesting that the Environment Agency will not support and provide advice. However, it is not our responsibility to identify and implement solutions.
Councillor Hawkins, does that answer your question?
Thank you. My question has not been answered. We have a responsibility to build the necessary housing that we're expected to deliver. The Water Authority is not the local planning authority, is it? It is the Cambridge Water that is the Water Authority.
Agreed.
So why are you saying that we have the responsibility for resolving something that is down to Cambridge Water?
I did state in combination with the Cambridge Water Company.
I think we understand what's being said there. Right. Councillor Khan.
There is a remark on the comment about the site. So there's quite a large amount of, it's in the sand and gravel protection area. I don't know how much resources and what sort of gravel resources there are, but that may well contain water on site. Are the water resources on site that could be of use, or would they be just as likely to be exhausted if they were used? What's the situation there?
Yeah, I think any localised water supplies in a sand and gravel aquifer would be too minor in terms of its reliability, so it's unlikely to be sustainable. We would also have to consider
do speak into your microphone.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, the resources are unlikely to be sufficient enough, and we would also have to consider the effect of abstracting that water more locally.
Thank you. So, Councillor Thornborough.
Thank you very much. In one of your letters, you quoted a 19.5% increase in water demand from 2012 to 2022 over 10 years. That's almost a 20% increase, and that seems to be evidenced as well. And you talk about we look for evidence, and we're talking about environmental damage. So I've got three questions. So the first one is about, can you describe more the environmental damage that is being caused by this level of increased abstraction? My other question is, the Secretary of State, Rebecca Powell, who's with DEFRA, she made a statement on the 20th of October regarding government's commitments to recognising chalk streams and they're having a special natural heritage. And she was referring to the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, and she said in Parliament that the chalk streams in the definitions of environmental protection and natural environment, meaning that chalk streams must be considered when undertaking environmental assessments in future. So the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill became law on Friday, and there is a clause in there which actually refers specifically to the natural environment, including, amongst other things, the protection of chalk streams from abstraction and pollution. So this new legislation, do you know how that may influence or provide material consideration for us as a committee? And can that new legislation, if we were to accept the officer's recommendation, could you or the officers say whether that would actually be part of a material consideration in new legislation? Thank you.
Right. A little suite of questions to challenge you there. So,
yeah, in
are
terms
you okay with those?
In terms of the evidence for the existing environmental impact, the Environment Agency has undertaken investigations through the River Basin Management Plan process.
initially, they sort of around 2012, identified certain water bodies where abstraction was believed to be causing the ecological status to not be meeting good status. And measures have been put in place for largely the water companies to deliver through their Water Industry National Environment Programme. So that includes the River Cam, the River Granta in particular, both of which, of course, are chalk streams. So there's evidence there that linked abstraction to flows in the river that were below where they needed to be, and measures have been put in place to restore that imbalance. There's also a wider range of evidence in terms of the effect of abstraction on headwaters and springs. So where rivers in their headwaters maybe flow ephemerally, intermittently, the length and duration of those periods gets worse. There's also evidence on the site condition of some of the water-dependent SSI wetlands, for example, Older Carr. And the evidence, which is difficult to quantify exactly, but when you have a naturally dry or drought situation, the effects of that are increased and prolonged by abstraction in the background. Droughts are natural, but they are made worse by abstraction. And also the recovery. So we do have ecological monitoring and assessment that's looked at the effect on particularly the invertebrate communities. We did prepare an evidence document for the previous planning inquiry, North East Cambridge, which sets out our main evidence base, and I would direct members towards that if they wanted more information. In terms of the second point on the Levelling Up Bill, I'm not able to comment at this stage. I'm not aware of how that's going to play through. But what I can say is in terms of chalk streams, many of Cambridge Water Company's abstractions are predominantly affecting chalk streams. So there is that direct cause and effect that chalk streams will be affected. Most of the abstraction increase that Cambridge would likely have to take to maintain supplies to existing and future customers will be from abstraction licenses that are principally affecting chalk streams.
Thank you. And you're happy with those? You've got 3 answers. Okay. Councillor Bagent.
Thanks very much for coming. I mean, it's going to be interesting seeing you, and I guess we're going to see you again more often. I really need some outline detail from you. We're a bit between a rock and a hard place. We have a requirement as a planning committee to encourage building and development of commerce and industry in our area. And we have a local plan which sets us out that we've got to achieve under government dictate a certain amount of expansion, a huge expansion actually, for an area as small as this. We have looming in the future a plan to bring 250,000 houses to Cambridge. So that's our requirement on one hand. And then you turn up, like the cavalry, I suppose, because a lot of people will be pleased to hear that you're objecting to the extraction of water. And in fact, will like the idea that you're attempting or asking us to stop the development of houses in Cambridge. So that's the sort of overview, which I find our position a bit complicated, because we're not the council, we are a planning authority. And in fact, we're a planning authority that represents 2 councils, one here in the city and one out.
Councillor Bagent, would you like to come to your question?
I'm getting there, Chair. I'm getting there. This is part of my question. And one council that is outside of the city and spreading off through Cambridgeshire. And that's without talking about what Cambridge County Council might want to be doing, who used to be part of this and no longer are. So my question, I've got 2 questions, I suppose. Where does this leave us if we accept what you're saying, which I doubt that your expertise is challengeable, so I think that we may have to accept your suggestion. How does that leave us in the position to any other developments in Cambridge? Because if we turn down 1,000 houses here, then
Councillor Bagent, we can only consider the application that is in front of us today. I appreciate your concern, but we have to be addressing the application that's in front of us.
Oh, you must ignore that question then. Second question. What powers do we have over the Water Authority? You've spoken about, it's not your role, it's ours to negotiate with the water company to find the extra water, I suppose. I mean, we can't even stop them putting sewage into the River Cam, and polluting our main river. So what power do we have? I'm asking a question, Chair.
I know. I would like to just clarify that we do not have sewage going into the River Cam. Thank you.
Could you say that again?
Not have sewage going into the River Cam below the Anglian Water site.
We have sewage going into the River Cam. So what power do we have over the water company, please? If that's all I've said down to that one little point.
So there's a potential confluence here of two different water companies, because Cambridge Water are a fresh water supply company only, so they only supply potable water. In terms of your power over water companies, I would have to defer you to your legal advisor with regard to the committee's legal precedent. The Environment Agency, as I've outlined, are England's regulator, and we are a consultee on Cambridge Water Company's Water Resource Management Plan, and will provide our recommendations and views to DEFRA and the Secretary of State, and we will be doing that within the coming weeks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bax. Would you just pause? Okay, I just want to check with you, Mr. Bax, since I curtailed Councillor Bagent's question about the cumulative impact, I wondered if you wanted to make a comment about the impact of cumulative developments.
Yeah, thank you. And I did somewhat allude to this in my opening statement, which is that because of the way that Cambridge Water Company's supply zone operates, and my colleague Ian Page has gone some way to outlining this, it's based on a combined system, so it operates as one system, which means that it's nigh on impossible to identify one abstraction source to one supply area, whether it be in completely different parts of the supply zone or not. So the reason that the Environment Agency are concerned about this development in combination with other development and associated risk is because of the operation of that water supply zone. So as Ian has already outlined, we have previously been involved in the recent inquiry, and our objection predominantly is on the same basis, and our ecological evidence supports both matters.
So from our point of view, the whole of the Chalk Basin acts as the supply source. Abstraction happens in a number of places, and it would be very hard to pin down a particular abstraction point to the risk caused by one development, because it all comes from that same sponge underneath the ground.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. I did have a question for you, which has this. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bagent, you also asked about what powers do we have over the Water Authority? I don't know whether you would feel able to answer that, Mr. Bax.
Apologies, I believe I had answered that. Yeah.
You referred us to our legal advisor.
Yeah.
The technology is not the best. It's a bit like our water, actually, sporadic. Thank you. I'll let that go.
Yes,
Just-
I think
Just on
Philippa Kelly might like
Just
to come
on
in
a
here.
point of confirmation, the local planning authority also has the opportunity to make representations on behalf of the council in respect of Cambridge Water's draft water resource management plan, which is what it has done, and then that document is ultimately confirmed as acceptable or not by DEFRA in due course.
I'm mindful we have Councillor Garvey, and then I might ask our legal advisor to speak to us on the point that was raised by Councillor Baton. Councillor Garvey.
Has there been any plan for grey water, using grey water as a source?
So you may be aware that there is already a development within Greater Cambridge which does feature the facilities for grey water usage and dual pipe networks into the properties. There is a map.
That's at Eddington.
Eddington, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
That is a matter which is being looked at the moment as part of the Water Scarcity Working Group, because it is reliant on a change in legislation which is regulated by the Drinking Water Inspectorate and government more widely, which does not allow the utilisation of grey water for supplying domestic properties. So that is something which is being looked at pace at the moment as part of the 250,000 homes response, which has already been referred to today.
Thank you. Councillor Garvey, do go ahead.
I just wondered whether, if this development doesn't go ahead because of the water problems, what will the future be then? You know, are you thinking that there's going to be some time in the future when it'll all be solved and so it can go ahead? Or?
Thank you, Councillor Garvey.
So this is very closely linked to the water companies' water resource management plans, and the current plan or the previous iteration which we have commented on, I'm not able to disclose our views on the latest because of our responsibility to advise DEFRA. However, there is a specific reliance on strategic resource options, one of which is a transfer pipe from Grafton Water, which is looking like the favoured strategic option, which is currently intended to become online in 2032. And that is the first strategic response of its type within the area, and that would bring additional water into the Cambridge Water Supply Zone. Until such time, Cambridge Water Company are reliant on demand management measures only.
Yes, Philippa Kelly.
Thank you. And just to clarify the position with regard to this particular planning application, Ms. Wright, on behalf of the applicant, confirmed in her presentation the willingness to consider further mitigation which may be necessary to address the concerns that are being raised by the Environment Agency. You'll note from the officer's report the recommendation which makes reference to an enhanced mitigation package which could include extra site-wide efficiency measures that go beyond the 110 litres per person water use per day for the residential element. Or also another option is to look at delaying the delivery of development until that major strategic infrastructure that Mr. Bax has just referenced, that is incorporated into the draft water resource management plan, comes online. Hope that helps clarify the position. Thank you.
And we also have plans in the public domain for a fen reservoir, which might also help with that problem. Do you happen to be able to remind us of the date when the fen reservoir is considered to be likely to come online?
Latest infers a delivery date of 2036 at the earliest.
Sorry? Is somebody saying no?
Well, all the numbers I've
Councillor
ever
Smith.
heard, yeah, sorry, all the numbers I've ever heard have been into the 2040s.
2040s?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, but, yeah. I don't think there's grounds for optimism in the delivery of strategic scale infrastructure in this country.
Okay, so let's come back, as I said I would, to Keith Barber, legal advice.
Thanks, Chair. In relation to any direct powers that the planning authority or the council has over the water companies, I have to admit, I don't know without further research. In relation to indirect influence, indirect control, or perhaps power, as Philippa has said, there's consultation process which the council contributes to in the settling of the water management plans. But I'm afraid that's as far as I can go in answer to Councillor Bajent's question, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that point, Cambridge Water is a private company. Yes, it has its responsibilities, but as a local authority, obviously, we have no control, do we?
Sorry, we have what?
We have no control over a private company, do we? As a local planning authority.
Keith Barber, could you respond?
Yes, Chair. In essence, yes, that's right, but it comes back to extraction or management plans for which there is a route in to try and influence.
Thank you. Councillor Bajent and then Councillor Smart.
Chair, I'd like to push at the envelope a bit and ask again. We're going to make a decision today about whether this is going to be allowed, and this is a particularly salient part of our decision. If we turn it down on the basis that there's not enough water in the area to supply these houses, that almost obliges us to say that any houses being built in this area there will not be enough water for. Or is it possible for us to say, oh, we can allow 100 houses on this site and we can't allow any more? Is there a balance figure here?
Can I, Councillor Bajent, I'm going to direct that question to Philippa Kelly, because I think that's...
Yeah.
Okay,
So
I'm
just,
quite happy
just
for
a point
that.
of clarification, if I may, Councillor Bajent. So the officer recommendation here is a minded to recommendation. We are no longer the determining authority for this planning application because it's gone to a planning appeal. So our position is one, if we were the determining authority, it's one of refusal. But I just think it's quite important to make that point. We're no longer responsible for determining this application.
Yes, we're not making a determination today. We're just making...
Okay, I'll ask the question again. If we're minded to recommend whatever it is that the officer's just said, will that mean that we're then bound to refuse all developments in the area?
Again, that's a question for Philippa Kelly, not for the Environment Agency.
So, and again, a point of clarification. Sorry, the point important to note, the recommendation advises that in the absence of adequate mitigation measures, which could potentially overcome that position, and I think it's very important to be aware of that. So it's not a refusal, which is a flat right, outright refusal. There is scope for further discussion potentially on agreeing an enhanced package of water efficiency mitigation measures that the applicant has confirmed an intention in principle to discuss with the local planning authority. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kelly. It's green because mine's on, Councillor Bajent. Would you like to speak again?
How clever. Sorry, did I miss something? So if we are minded to make our thoughts public on this site, and when we talk about mitigation, did I hear you correctly to say that it's wrong or it's not even legal for us to allow mitigation in regards to grey water on a residential development.
Agent, thank you for addressing your questions to me. Would the Environment Agency like to comment on that?
I didn't say it was wrong. I think there is merit in grey water harvesting. As I've attempted to outline, the current legislation doesn't enable a water company to provide grey water harvested water to domestic properties because the legislation outlines that it must be clean and wholesome. That is a matter which is being reviewed at the moment by government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bax. Right. And Councillor Smart had asked to speak, and I can see Smith and Porra. Yep. Do go ahead, Councillor Smart.
So, as Councillor Bagent said, thank you for coming along in person today. I think we all appreciate that. Thank you. So, both for this planning item and for the needs of residents in a representative democracy, it's important, I think, for all of us. So, this is a matter of great concern, and don't hold you personally responsible.
So, Councillor Smart, can I just suggest you address your questions to me, and the Environment Agency
It's the microphone,
will
see,
hear.
that's the
Thank you.
thing.
That's great. Thank you
Speaking
so
to
much.
these nice people over here, you know.
Yes, that's all right. We know how to debate.
I
though,
see
don't
all
we?
the time.
Thank you.
So to be clear, where am I? I wrote some notes. So someone else is at fault here. And just to be clear, and I say this in all seriousness, Chair, the Tories flogged our water, fat cats got very rich, and now we've run out of water. So I presume you're all from the Environment Agency. I'm not quite clear. But anyway, you said today that unsustainable levels of abstraction from Cambridge Water, which means they're taking too much water out of the ground, and it's not, we can't go on like it. So in terms of that and other things, my question is, do you consider the water provider to be not fit for purpose?
So, do you consider the water
Do you
provider?
consider the water provider, Cambridge Water, to be not fit for purpose?
I think, Councillor Smart, that is probably an inappropriate question. I would advise the Chair to disregard that question.
Thank you, Keith. Right, so, Councillor Smart, did you have any further questions?
I'd like to follow up, please. So, as I said, the speaker said that Cambridge Water are abstracting unsustainable levels from the ground. So, if that's the case, surely that means they're not fit for purpose, because that's part of supplying water,
Councillor
isn't
Smart,
it?
you've been advised by the legal advisor, and I am conveying to you again that that's a question that we will disregard. Did you have another question, or was that the only one?
Well, I'm disregarding the legal officer, but I'm paying attention to you, Chair. So if that's your decision, then I will comply with that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smart. Councillors?
Chair,
Yes,
could I just...
yeah, do.
It's not for me to ask questions, but perhaps Councillor Smart is more interested in whether Cambridge Water are working within the confines of their extraction licences.
Thank you for that clarification, and I'll address that to Mr. Baggs.
I can confirm that presently Cambridge Water Company, in its plans, is working within the confines of its licensed abstraction level. Those licenses go back many years, and the environmental understanding at the time they were issued is not the same as it is now. So, as we have done over the last 20 or so years, there's a programme of restoring sustainable abstraction, but that does take time to provide the replacement supplies without destabilising our water supply system. So presently, in terms of the draft water resource management plan Cambridge Water has submitted, it is abstracting within its legally compliant levels of abstraction. What we're saying is those levels need to reduce, And that is where you get the imbalance between its ability to maintain supplies to existing and future customers with that reduced level of abstraction.
Thank you very much. And that's Ian Page, isn't it? Thank you. And indeed, as a member of the Internal Drainage Board in Waterbeach, I'm conscious that that same principle of the licences being in perpetuity when they were first drawn up applies to many of the farmers in the area as well. And it's those licences also that are being, there's a wish to consider reviewing them. So, Councillor Smart, do you want to come back on that point, and then I will come to Councillor Smith and Councillor Porra.
Very kindly, just let me come back again, Chair. So just to be clear then, and thank you for letting me put that question to the people that have come today. If the first speaker has said that the levels of abstraction are unsustainable, and the speaker that has just spoken then has said that they're operating within the law, within their licences, does that mean that the finger of blame is being pointed by the last speaker at the authority that gave the licences in the first place? Because someone's at fault here.
But I think the point is, Councillor Smart, is it's in ancient history. The licences were granted literally hundreds of years ago, I think, if not decades. So it's something that it is recognised that there is a need for review of those abstraction licences. But bear in mind, those abstraction licences also enable cauliflowers to be grown on the fen and potatoes and all that sort of thing as well. So it affects our farming and food production. And sorry, Councillor Smart, I'm going to go on to Councillor Smith now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It seems very clear that we're in a position at the moment. We're in a position at the moment of great political and policy uncertainty. There's the objections the Environment Agency have made in respect of the Cambridge Water Management Plan, and submissions are proposed, new submissions are proposed in response to the clarifications that Cambridge Water have recently published. And then it'll be going on to DEFRA to make a decision. So we're being asked to, and we're not even actually going to be determining this planning application, we're just going to make we would be minded to decision today. And it seems to me that we'll be doing that prematurely in front of the DEFRA's decision on the water management plan. And in parallel with all of that, we have an approved local plan, we have the National Policy Planning Framework which we need to comply with, and we have to have a 5-year housing supply. So the recommendation to us is to continue to work constructively with the applicant to produce a water mitigation strategy or plan to reduce the number of litres per person per day, as close as possible to that of that's proposed in the emerging local plan of 80 litres per person per day, and also to negotiate a phasing plan so that the demand for the construction is phased in line with the delivery of the first strategic intervention, which is the water supply from Grafham Water. Now that is not so onerous, Chair, because when we look back at phase 1 of Darwin Green, I think the outline was approved in 2012, and we're really still only in the early stages of the development, the building out of that development. So within, and I think as Councillor Bajan said, we're between a rock and a hard place here. We have our statutory duties as local planning authority. On the other hand, we are very, very concerned about the protection of the environment and the there was no further deterioration at all. And it's now going to be up to the Inspector and the Secretary of State to determine which is the planning balance in effect between the further deterioration of the environment or delivery of the housing that we are charged to promote and within accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework and our local plan. So it's a very difficult matter for us, but my view is that we should encourage the officers and the applicants to work towards the practical delivery of water mitigation and a phasing plan that will mitigate, again, the additional demand on water. And that would, and I know we're just determining this application or considering this application, but that would then set a precedent for all future applications coming forward in advance of decision by DEFRA on water management and the work of the water scarcity group, which I do hope will accelerate and bring forward those strategic interventions. Thank you, Chair. And also, Chair, I've got other comments to make on the wider application other than this matter, so if we can come revisit that after we've dealt with the water issue. Please.
Absolutely so. Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you,
still
Chair.
have questions from Councillor Porrer and Councillor Thornborough. Councillor Porrer.
Thank you very much, Chair. No, I do concur with what Councillor Smith was saying.
Excuse me, members. Would you excuse me? Would you refrain from conversation when Councillor Porrer is speaking? Thank you.
So I do concur with Councillor Smith. I won't repeat things. It is to me clear that we do have an issue at Councillor Hawkins' Way. Cambridge Water is letting us down. I appreciate they're within their abstraction caps, although I gather they're pushing quite close. But I do think I'm right in saying that the EA has already stated at Brookgate that they weren't meeting their 2019 targets for demand management. So I think, I absolutely feel there's a tension there. It's a company we can't control. And I do understand the EA's concern. So I think it would hopefully be fair to say at least that they are not compliant in some areas. I am really disappointed that this has ended up coming to a minded to decision. I don't understand really, I understand legally why the applicant would want to do this, because you don't have to agree an extension of time. But what we've now got is all the hassle and expense and stress of an appeal when allegedly the applicant is still working with officers to try and resolve it. And
can I just clarify?
I find that challenging.
We are still asking questions
Yes.
to Environment Agency. We can come into debate over the broader application.
Yeah, my question was going to lead from that, I apologise. But yeah, so I expressed my disappointment. But I suppose what I would say to the EA is there a resolution? So, for example, if the developers were to come back and say we're going to halve the water usage, for example, is there anything that could be acceptable? I think we're kind of implying there would be some kind of common ground. But I'd just like some clarification on that, because obviously the water emergency is dire, but obviously that will help sort of inform us when we're looking at our decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask the EA if you feel there is a resolution possible if mitigation is undertaken?
Apologies. We're just trying to decide who was best suited. So we've been in discussions with Philippa and the wider team and are very willing and committed to continuing those discussions. The Environment Agency, as I've outlined, are a statutory consultee, and therefore we are willing to review and deliberate on any proposed mitigation that is put before us. As I've outlined, there is a strategic resource option due in 2032, as we understand it, which, based on the current indicative allocation of water that will present to Cambridge Water Company, that will provide a key stepping stone in moving away from this situation. However, at the current time, Cambridge Water Company are wholly reliant on demand management measures, which, as you have just outlined in terms of the performance and the 2019 figures, does cause the Environment Agency some concerns. However, we do we do believe and are working with the Water Scarcity Working Group to try and identify where there are mitigation measures that can be put in place that will reduce current levels of consumption within Cambridge Water Company's supply area, and therefore, the theory goes, will then relinquish an element of additional water which could then be utilised to support priority development, which again links back into the planning authority's domain. That said, it would need to be proven how much water has been saved, that the environment is benefiting or no further deterioration is happening as a result, before, from the Environment Agency's perspective, we would seek to support said development. So, yes, there are a raft of mitigation measures. However, regrettably, there is no silver bullet for this.
I'm going to come to Councillor Thornborough, but I just want to come back on the point that you made there. In your view, if mitigation measures are largely to do with, broadly speaking, the only thing I can think of is fixtures and fittings in bathrooms that reduce flow, my concern is that, A, we have no control. That might be put into a house to begin with, but people can go down to B&Q and buy another version, and we have no enforcement. The only thing would be through monitoring, through water meterage, what individual homes' usage is, and perhaps applying a sliding scale of charges. You know, so minimal use, one charge, additional use, extra charge, and then the wealthy would just use it anyway. So one of the problems is we have no enforcement. And the only evidence we have of whether a mitigation is working or not is so broad and vague and just relates to whether a chalk stream is there and flowing or not. It's almost impossible to chase. And so I just wondered if you have any actual monitoring ability in terms of the aquifer. I mean, presumably you have boreholes that check where the aquifer is, but I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, we have networks monitoring water levels in rivers and also in the aquifer itself. We also undertake monitoring of the river ecology at various locations. So there are data present on the state of the environment, and obviously that will fluctuate naturally and will have an additional effect because of abstraction. In terms of the feedback and the points that you made, yes, it is the case that demand management largely is reliant on behavioural change of the customer, and there is uncertainty there. So any mitigation measures that rely on demand management do come with risks. It's not that demand management is bad or wrong or shouldn't be tried, but it does need that constant input into it. I think the other point to make is that the mitigation can be viewed as removing the problem altogether. I think it's more risk reduction in some of these instances. So even, I think you mentioned earlier, if you were to halve the water consumption, it lowers the risk, but it probably doesn't remove it altogether because there's still a net increase in demand, which on the present evidence that we have is likely to lead to an increase in abstraction. But that could be moderated by demand management offsetting some of that. So it is a complex balance, but the supply option from Grapham, if it's delivered in time, has more certainty that it provides that sustainable source of water that then allows the licence reductions to be made on Cambridge Water's chalk abstraction licences to the level which we believe presently would prevent the deterioration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Page. Councillor Thornborough.
I'd like some more information about evidence and also a better understanding for me about the whole size of the issue that we're talking about. So you talked about the evidence to damage, the environmental damage. So what I'd like to try and understand is what level of reduced abstraction is needed. So we are in discussing about this new application, we are really considering what is happening here and now, and also this future application. So if
What
we,
questions would you
if
like
we,
to ask?
if this application weren't to go ahead, is there going to be ongoing deterioration with the current situation? Because, for example, your document said there's been 19% increase in current abstraction over the last 10 years. So is the situation right now causing more damage? So how much do we need to reduce right now, do you think, to stop the environmental damage? And back in about when we started putting together the last local plan, it was the intention that local plan would ask for 80 litres per person per day, because we knew at that time that this is a dry area, and that's why Eddington was built as it was. And the officers wanted that level of ultra water efficiency in the local plan, but that was removed from the local plan. So we knew then that we needed that efficiency, and it was removed. So that's created the situation we are now. So we're saying, but okay, if we do ultra water efficient measures going forward, we still have the current situation to deal with. So if the Grafham water comes in, is that just going to alleviate the problem that we've got now, rather than the future housing that we know there's an evidence that it's needed?
Right, I'm going to summarise those. Fortunately, I took some notes. So the first question, I think, was, if this application were not to go ahead, will there still be an ongoing deterioration in water supply?
Yes,
Do
there
that one
would be.
first.
Yes. So there's an issue now which is compounded by additional abstraction through growth or existing customers using increasing levels of water.
Okay. The second one was, in our emerging local plan, we wanted to go for 80 litres per person per day because we knew that we are under pressure. And the question was, there were sort of two questions there. Will that be enough? And the second part of that was, will the Grafham supply simply alleviate the problem we have now, or will it be enough to alleviate future problems?
The Grafham transfer allows Cambridge Water Company to make the licence changes to bring levels back to the baseline against which the environment was last assessed through the River Basin Management Plan. So it's that no deterioration baseline. So it could be viewed as it holds the situation where it is, but it has to be borne in mind that situation could be one where the environment is not at good status. So it allows essentially to stop things getting worse, if I can put it crudely like that. The environmental improvement aspect is delivered through the long-term environmental ambition of the regional water resources plans, so Water Resources East, and the water that would be required to get the ecology back to good status. You are probably looking at needing the Fens Reservoir for the significant quantities required to do that. The 80 litres per head per day will improve the situation in terms of lowering the risks, but of itself would not be enough to remove the risks altogether.
Fantastic, thank you very much.
Can I?
Just one moment while I'm thinking. Councillor Thornborough.
One question was, currently, how much reduction is needed? Does the Environment Agency needs to be reduced right now to work towards a good level? Thanks.
I don't have the numbers to hand, but that's certainly something that we can provide if that's acceptable.
Most helpful if you could provide it afterwards. A really region-wide concern here. Councillor Smart, don't worry, I have seen your hand. And we are recognising that the recommendation we give today has quite long, could potentially have quite long effect, long-acting influences. So it's extremely useful to be able to speak to you, and I thank you so much for coming. But I want to remind members that today we are simply looking at how to advise our officers regarding this particular application so that they are able to proceed to appeal informed in the way that we would like them to be informed. Councillor Smart.
So you mentioned a raft of mitigation measures. So is one of those mitigation measures to adjust cost, so to use Keynesian economics to reduce demand for water by increasing cost, so higher bills for residents? Is that on the table?
My understanding is that's something that's being looked at by the water company at the current time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Right. I can't see any other questions. So thank you so much. We won't be able to invite you to take part in any further debate, but thank you so much for answering all those very searching questions. We do appreciate it. And any further information you're able to send us through officers would be most welcome. Thank you. Can I just ask if Philippa Kelly would like to speak? Going on.
Comfort break.
Oh, comfort break. Okay. Yes, in fact, I was going to suggest that. After that really interesting and stimulating discussion, let us have a pause until 10:02 for natural purposes. Thank you very much. Can we go offline, please? Thank you very much. Are we ready to recommence? Oh, we need Keith. Just a pause for a moment. Take a slide. Thank you very much. Okay, so members, we've had a really useful question and answer session with the Environment Agency, which I hope you found useful. So, I am minded that we should not only look at the issues to do with water, which are the main material issues which are guiding the officer's recommendation. Sorry, that's to massively underestimate the amount of work that Guy Wilson has done on the application, but this is the crucial part. But members, are there other issues you wish to consider about the merits of the application? I have Councillor Hawkins, Councillor whoops, okay, let's try it. I'll go around the hall. Okay, so Councillor Hawkins, would you like to kick us off? Oh, okay. Councillor Thornborough first, that's fine. I will ask each of you, I think.
So, Anglian Water was stated that the foul water drainage, there's no current capacity, but necessary steps will be taken if approved. If this application is approved, is part of the material consideration, should it not be how is that capacity going to be improved? And should the application, should it be a condition that they have to show that the capacity is there before work start on site, or before first occupation probably?
So how will they, do they have to demonstrate how supply will be achieved before we can make a decision? Shall we ask Philippa to respond to that while you're thinking of your second? Thank you.
Anglian Water has an obligation to serve new homes that would be covered under separate legislation. We wouldn't usually seek to secure conditions to ensure that that is delivered. It's the responsibility of Anglian Water, and they would need to fulfil that requirement as part of their own separate process.
Can I just ask an adjunct to that then? But if the way to supply that water was through infrastructure that has not yet been planned, I mean, it might be a twinkle in someone's eye, but it's not there yet. If we were to suppose, I'm not saying we would, but if we were to approve this, and Anglian Water said, we're obliged to supply, so we'll have to carry on supplying from the existing resources, wouldn't that have the effect of damaging the environment even more? Or you know, how does the timing work? Okay. And Councillor Thornborough, you had a second.
Also, just on that, I know that for the last at least 2 years, this committee has approving schemes where they have said very similar things, that there is no capacity, but if it's approved, we will find a capacity. So are they looking at the accumulative effect of all of these schemes coming through without current capacity? And then my second question was the quality panel report highlighted quite a few things, and I just wondered if they had been addressed, and if so, how had they been addressed? Thanks.
If I may come back with regard to the issue for Anglian Water. So just to clarify the position, the consultation response at paragraph 7.20, page 24 of your report, the issue about the capacity is in relation to the foul water drainage treatment network. So it's separate from the supply of the potable water.
No, it was specifically about foul water that I was questioning, that
Yes.
there's no current capacity within the existing wastewater treatment. And previous planning approvals raised the same point, so is there...
Can I just come back in there? There is an element that, of course, foul water requires water as well. And it is the potable water that goes through the system and then becomes foul. But, you know, I know that elsewhere and in different times, developments have been refused because of the grounds that there wasn't enough supply to ensure that the foul water could be removed. But also, I'd like to, while I'm speaking, ask, we've been reminded that, and I have reminded us, we need to be looking at this as an application today. But I would like to ask, can we seek advice to this committee in the form of a cumulative impact assessment of the impact of decisions in this time which the Environment Agency pointed out was a time of pressure on water and potential insufficiency of supply? Can we seek that? And, and who could we seek that from?
Just to clarify, do you mean in reference to this particular planning application?
No, I mean with regard to going forward with our local plan.
I think there's something that officers can take away to have a think about coming back with perhaps a joint presentation with our local plan colleagues and indeed perhaps even the Environment Agency, and to have another member briefing on this issue. Something I'll certainly take away and see how we can
The reason I ask is because I know in a previous, many years ago, the planning committee at South Cambs asked for a cumulative impact assessment of solar photovoltaic arrays on the area, because if we continue always to make decisions on individual applications as we are required to, then there's a chance that we miss the overriding problem that we might be causing by making those individual decisions. So can I request that we do have a report back to the planning committees, all of them, about the impact, because and how it may or may not, how it is allowed to influence our decision making, and what weight we need to apply to that in our decision making. Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. My question actually is probably more specific, taking points that Councillor Bumble raised in her second question, which is the points in the design quality report. Now, I am concerned, in 26.5 on page 74, that was one of the harms that was outlined. And that concerned me as well, looking at the cycling network.
Sorry, the cycling?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Now, under the Cambridge Quality Panel summary, it talks about, that one in the connectivity section, where it says that it appears that the broader cycling network, etc., isn't continuous. And that is definitely a big issue, especially when, for the future, we're looking at active travel, cycling and walking. And I think this is a big site that really should be a lot more, porous when it comes to cyclists. I just want to know what improvements were made based on that recommendation. And if we go to the community section on page 87, there was a lot of talk about flats over garages and mews which have minimal open space. Some were single aspect. Was that improved? A skate park for teenagers on the edge and overlooked and unoverlooked could become a focus for nefarious activity. That is a strong word. Was that actually, re-looked at and relocated?
Did you say that was on page 86, Councillor?
87.
Okay, thank you.
Second to the last paragraph. And also, the quality panel mentioned space for a creche to be made available. And we know in South Cambs, because we had a motion recently about provision of space for children's, looking after children, whatever it is, we call nurseries and things like that.
We're referring to childcare.
Childcare, thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
That was down to Sarah, thank you.
Yes, that's what creche is for, isn't it?
Yeah.
And last but not least, on page 89, in the character section, talked about the character within the central areas needed to be developed more. There didn't seem to be a link between the buildings and the character of the area. Just seemed not quite right. So my question is, was any of that actually improved in the plan that is now before us today?
From the quality, since the quality panel's comments, has it been changed since? So perhaps, Guy, can you advise us on that? Whether since the quality panel's comments, have those things been taken on board by this current development application that's in front of us?
So I think a key point, a lot of the comments made by the quality panel relate to fairly detailed points which we picked up more at the sort of the design code stage and at the reserve matter stage. So a lot of the kind of detail around connections and so on, that'll be sort of needs to be considered at a later date. So it's not really those sort of updates aren't reflected in sort of the parameter plans or anything at this stage. But my understanding is that those kind of points.
So under reserved matters.
Yeah, and the design code. So things like the kind of character areas and some of the kind of more detail around connections and so on, and sort of building typologies and so on. That will be picked up at a later stage. But obviously, satisfied that the kind of key kind of parameters that need to be agreed at this stage. So those kind of connections and sort of internal kind of key internal routes and so on. I think that those kind of are acceptable.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Councillor Hawkins.
If they are acceptable, okay. Let me step back to the active travel one.
Councillor Hawkins, can you come a bit, or bring your microphone
Certainly,
a little closer?
that didn't seem to be acceptable because it's one of the harm points that was raised in 26.5. So I'm still concerned that some of these might seem acceptable, but not necessarily so for a development that is going to be going into the 2030s, 2040s.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to speak now because I also have some things which fall into the same sort of category. I'm looking at section on page 44, in a similar way, things that have been raised that I was a bit concerned about. One was at 14.7, in this application it talks about the fact that it includes a consideration of retail space, and yet we're told that policy E21 doesn't identify the site as a preferred site for retail, and there are a number of local centres nearby, including Darwin Green 1 and Orchard Park. But we know, don't we, that if people have to go a very long way to pick up their newspaper or a pint of milk, they will drive, and we don't want them to do that. So we need to make appropriate retail available to them, locally enough to them that they will not drive. Next one down is 14.8. I'm concerned about the number of provisions that are being proposed to be provided off-site. So burial space. And I'm thinking, why on earth should a 1,000 dwelling development be enabled to provide burial space off-site, unless there's a wonderful crematorium being planned somewhere else? And, that's important too, because many of our, certainly city-based and district burial spaces are and burial grounds are, quite full. There's also reference in 1512 to provision for swimming pool, and it says, this area is recognised, it needs a swimming pool. So good that there's an off-site provision, but I don't see that referenced in the heads of terms, which I would like to see. And then we move on to the other aspects. One of the things was a reference to flood risk at 16.5, and there's a considerable reference to ground raising by 2 metres. And it says that that will not impact the surrounding areas, but I'm quite concerned about that, about the impact on other areas, the risk of flood elsewhere. I mean, we have to trust the lead local flood authority that they're saying this will not cause an increased risk of flooding to other properties, but I am concerned about that. And the final one from me at this point is in the urban design parameter plan comments, I'm concerned about what proportion of the roads will be adoptable, because again, we have this potential that where we encourage the development of play streets and mews that are to enable children to play in them, inevitably they become non-adoptable. And actually that puts an enormous cost on the residents of the development. So I would like to seek some reassurance that the maximum number of roads, and I know we addressed this at the Cherry Hinton development, land north of Cherry Hinton, and we increased the proportion of roads that were to be built to adoptable standards, and that was deliberately to reduce the costs to the residents of this future development. So I can see, Guy, you're furiously writing, so I'm hoping that's helpful. Members, anybody? So Guy, would you like to respond to those questions?
Yes, so if I take those in turn. So regard to sort of retail provision, so the general
sorry, did you want to go back to Councillor Hawkins's point first, which was about cycling connectivity, not being continuous, space for childcare, buildings not in keeping with the character of the area, I think. Those were the things you raised, Councillor Hawkins, or were there others? Are you okay? Sorry, those are the things that you raised? Thank you.
So if I just share the movement and access parameter plan, so just to kind of run through these a bit more. So on the, I'll just get the pointer up. So on the eastern side of site, so obviously satisfied as some of the good connections. So using the access road provided by sort of Darwin Green 1, and also there's the existing public right of way which joins onto Cambridge Road, and then into Darwin Green 1 as well. There's a good range of connections. There'll be some connections all along this sort of this kind of green corridor, which runs along the southern side of the site, providing sort of good connectivity between Darwin Green 1 and Darwin Green 2 and 3. Then sort of into the western connections, so this footpath connection is proposed into Thornton Close to join the existing footpath, and so obviously satisfied that that can be delivered as the appellant can deliver an access to their boundary, and then that will connect into the footpath directly. For Thornton Way, again, that connection appears to be deliverable, and that will provide a good sort of walking, cycling route, which will connect through from Thornton Way and sort of the existing residential areas in Girton into the site. Just with discussions with the county council, with the appellant, that connection does appear to be deliverable. With the other two connections, so there's challenges because they require land which is outside of the ownership of the appellant, and we've sort of discussed the option of delivering these with the county council, who have sort of statutory powers to deliver new sort of public rights of way and new footpaths. But obviously there's kind of restrictions on their powers and doing so. So there has to be sort of a clear justification and evidence that it is actually deliverable. I think the challenges with the Welbeck Way connection is because the Welbeck Way itself is not an adopted highway, so the intervening land is in third-party ownership, and the ownership of that is unclear. The County Council don't believe that that connection can be delivered beyond the boundary of the application site. So the intention is that a connection will be delivered, will likely be delivered up to the boundary, but there's no sort of certainty whether the onward connection can actually be delivered. And so if we impose an obligation through either condition or a Section 106 or through the Section 106 agreement, we need to be clear that is actually deliverable. And as it isn't in this case, we don't think that it's something we can require. And again, with the A14 bridge, that goes into land in third-party ownership. So it's into farmland, and there's no sort of nearby public rights of way. So again, following discussions with the County Council and the appellant is that connection is unlikely to be deliverable. Nevertheless, with the two kind of western connections, the Thornton Way and Thornton Close, providing sort of direct walking, cycling connectivity into Girton, as well as some good connections into Durham Green 1 and also into the eastern Cambridge Road, I think officers are satisfied that there is a good sort of network of connections to the surrounding area, as well as good connections through the site itself.
Thank you. And I'll just point out to remind you that assume that what's in your report has been read, but was there any provision for skate parking? And Councillor Hawkins mentioned space for childcare and whether buildings were in character.
Yeah, so in regard to skate parking, so skate park is similar. I think that's something which, again, the detail will be a matter for the reserve matter stage for the country park, but I think there's anticipated to provide some sort of youth facilities such as a skate park, and the details of that to be agreed, obviously, through the reserve matter stage, but I believe that is, a skate park or similar is the intention at this stage.
Childcare?
In terms of childcare, so there'll be some early years provision provided through the primary school. But in terms of nursery provision, there's no sort of direct nursery provision on site at this stage. It's something we're discussing with the appellant to see whether there's potential to deliver something potentially alongside the community building. Or elsewhere on site, or potentially as an off-site provision if necessary. One of the challenges with sort of nursery provision is it's not something, it's a statutory provision through the County Council. It's delivered through sort of the open market. It's a sort of a slightly different kind of consideration to to general other educational sort of provision. So whereas we can in terms of how we secure it, but it's something we're kind of looking at as part, and it's noted in the heads of terms.
Thank you. And just one thing while we're on that, elsewhere we are seeking no constraints on purchasers who might have a house and want to offer childcare. I hope we'd be in a position where we could ensure that no such constraints are put on ownership or tenancy if people are prepared to offer childcare in the proper licensed way in their own homes. Can we be assured of that?
Yes, I think, if in the future there's any kind of desire to sort of change the use to provide sort of childcare, then that's something we'd consider at that stage. But
it's to avoid restrictive covenants.
There's no restrictions on that as far as
good. Okay. Does that cover your questions, Councillor Hawkins? Okay, thank you. So, sorry? Okay. So I
Apologies. May I ask a question about procedure?
certainly do.
I just wondered, is the discussion we're having now maybe to add to the reasons for refusal as recommended by the officers? So my understanding is we can either give you kind of minded to approve officers' recommendations or their recommendations with further reasons, or we go against their recommendations and then we need to go through all the conditions. Is that correct?
It's a good point to raise. My feeling was that if we had any other reservations about the development that we might want to raise, I was feeling that we might wish to add those. But let's take advice from Keith Barber or Philippa about...
Yeah, so the purposes of this discussion, the debate, is to identify any additional issues and potentially have them addressed. I would advise caution that if you did want to seek additional reasons for refusal, there would need to be a strong evidence-based justification for that, or you may wish to add to the suite of conditions that's being included as an appendix within the document. So there is an opportunity here for that dialogue as part of this meeting.
Can I just... I'm aware that Councillor Smith has his hand up and Councillor Flaubert, but I'd like my questions responded to as well. So can I just... I'll come back to you. Perhaps I'll come back to that in a minute. So it's just a pointer to Guy. I still want my questions responded. I'll go to Councillor Smith first, then Councillor Flaubert, Councillor Porrer and Councillor Khan.
So thank you, Chair. I think we do need to be focusing on conditions as to whether or not we're going to add conditions or whether we're going to amend conditions. And I've got a few to put to you. The first one's condition 60, and this relates to gas. And I read elsewhere in the report that there'll be no gas on this development, and indeed, we're going towards zero carbon. We shouldn't be introducing gas onto this site. So,
Can I just ask you, which page are you on, Councillor Smith?
This is on page 156
Right.
of the papers, and it's condition 60. I think it's probably just drifted its way into here because it's on a template. This has no place, and I'm asking that to be struck out. We look at condition 9. It refers to submitting the design code prior to or concurrently with the first reserved matters. I've got a strong view that we should be considering the design code prior to any submission of reserved matters, because our consideration and our advice to the applicant would inform the first reserved matters application, which would not be possible if the two applications were submitted together. I think that would be a much more effective and efficient way in which to enable the applicant to progress through the development without encountering difficulties with the committee.
So the point is prior to rather than concurrently with?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. We're just looking at, now, one of the lessons we've learned from BDW1 is, in effect, old standards were stored up from 2012, which have really been succeeded by very progressive changes in policy requirements and standards because of our growing concern with climate change and water and infrastructure and just design standards and a whole manner of matters which this committee discusses on a regular basis. And I'm concerned that we we approve these conditions as drafted, we may not be able to insist on updated standards being applied in the reserve matters applications as they come through. Now, I note there's references to future sustainable energy standards in conditions 40, 57 and 58, but I would request the officers to go through all of these with a fine-tooth comb to make and insert that update with existing and new, the new standards throughout all of the conditions, because we must anticipate new regulations coming in, higher standards, and make sure that we're not caught out again, because what happened on BDW1 was that houses were being built at low energy standards than was acceptable for entirely new applications. And cumulatively, since the coalition government set back higher construction standards, I think it was in 2014, 2 million houses have been built in this country, which will now need to be retrofitted. And that is a ridiculous situation for us to have got into. So let's repeat that mistake, please. So on condition 41, I noticed that the schools are excluded from BREEAM Excellent. Now, I think it was a reference that there would be a stretch for target for the schools. I can't find that anywhere in the document. So I just wanted to make sure that there was a reference, strictly, specific reference to the standard of the construction of the schools, because clearly, if it's under the highest possible standard, then that's going to be a cost on the public sector for some time, but we must be able to cut that out. On the community facilities, and this is a reserve matter issue, but I think it's just worth logging now. I noticed that the proposal at 14.6 in the document is to co-locate the community centre with the shops in a local centre. And I would counsel strongly against that. I think it should be better in the cluster of buildings around the schools, because we've got to bear in mind local authorities will not have the resources to keep these freestanding buildings going. Facility management and the security and the opening and closing and all the rest of it is not something that we're going to be able to support in the long term. And it's better if it's co-located with the schools. I'm also wanting to make sure that when you are negotiating the Section 106, that we have early trigger points for the secondary school and for the play areas. Again, a lesson learned from BDW1, encountering parents with young children, and it's young families that move into these estates, having no place for the children to play, and it drives, the children need the exercise and it drives the parents crackers. So we have associated with this, so we have to have early trigger points for those. I'm nearly there.
Sorry, can I just ask you on that point? We know, don't we, that we have to be very careful not to make trigger points too early, because they can have the effect of acting like a magnet for children from schools out of catchment, rather than allowing those developments to fill those schools naturally and organically. So can we leave that trigger point to be discussed in some detail with the County Council sufficiency officers?
Indeed, but there are rising class sizes in the schools in Cambridge City, and I recently helped parents at an appeal because they'd been refused planning a school place at their local school, and they've been sent to St Ives.
Yes,
so there is a secondary school place crisis in this city, and I accept your point, Chair, but let's just get that's in front of the County Council, because their projections are wrong at the moment.
And we also need to be mindful that there are schools that are emptying at primary level because of the same thing.
At primary level, this is secondary.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So I think we're in agreement on that one. The other point was, as representatives of the applicant are present today, to encourage you, when it comes to the design code stage, to bring that forward to a pre-application presentation. We had a case recently where an applicant didn't do that, and consideration of their planning application actually amounted to a pre-app kind of discussion. There were so many elements wrong with that scheme that we could have helped them with if they'd come to a pre-app. So strongly encourage you to come and do that. And I'd also encourage the applicant to have regard to the delivery of Section 106 and terms and conditions in a timely manner. BDW1 has been plagued by the fact that the developer has rather taken a pick and mix approach to compliance with conditions, and it's caused a lot of concern amongst residents, of course, with the local planning authority, because it is almost contempt of the local planning authority not to comply with the conditions that we had agreed. And then I think there's just the other point that when it comes to design code, reserved matters, I'd certainly like to see hard surface routes in the country park, as well as the skate park.
I didn't catch that. What was
Hard surface routes in the country park and the skate park, as was promised to us in the presentation that was made some months ago by representatives of BDW on this site.
Sorry, did you say
hard surface paths?
Paths.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then the last point was, again, when it comes to design code, paying full attention to CAM Cycle's objections on page 29 of the planning document, and then just finally, my endorsement of this additional condition relating to the buildings on the site, and I thank the officers for bringing that forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Really useful points for the appellant and for the developer to consider. Right. Let me go back to my list. Councillor Thornburg, I'm letting you come back because the original question about what are we doing here was, are we adding suggestions which must be taken into account, or we would like to be taken into account in this? Do you want to come back?
Specifically on that point again, there's a very detailed discussions going on about conditions. Now, my understanding is there is a reason for refusal, and there is currently ongoing discussions with the applicant about mitigating the environmental damage or the water use. And if that mitigation can be agreed, then it may be that the recommendation would be different in the future. So are we, this discussion on conditions, is that to be taken forward is that being taken forward with the conversations about mitigation of water?
That's my fond hope, having gone through all this rehearsal of the things that we're concerned about, that would be taken forward, because obviously we're making a recommendation for our officers so that they know how we feel about this application before going forward and representing our views at the appeal. So it's important that they know the other things that we are concerned about, not just about water. So I'm fondly hoping that everyone's furiously taking notes and we'll take those on board too. Is that okay, Councillor Thornburg? Okay, so now, Councillor, back to my list. Councillor Flaubert.
Thank you, Chair.
Disappear under the desk to find your notes.
There are a few conditions that I would like to be strengthened, and that is condition 45 and 10. I believe that this could be done by adding our recent cross-party motion to include appropriate inclusive play, for example, involving the disability panel.
But just before you go on, 45 is about youth and play space.
Yes,
Do
and
go on.
10. This is, well, to secure compliance with the law and our commitment to inclusiveness. There is also condition 26. I haven't seen anything mentioned about maintenance of trees. I think that maybe we could add a condition or to have detailed information of maintenance, because we have in the past problems with trees dying because nobody's taking the responsibility and then replanting them. I think we can avoid that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we've got 46 and 10, that's the youth and play strategy and youth and play space, and 26, maintenance of trees. And we often have had an undertaking that means that if something dies within 5 years, it's replaced. Is that the sort of thing? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to interject into my list of speakers because I'm still waiting for my points that I raised with Guy Wilson to be addressed. So if that's helpful, Guy, I'm sorry, it's dodging around a bit, but can I just ask about the issues to do with retail space and the reference to the fact that retail space is available at Orchard Park, burial space, swimming pool provision, and adoptable roads, please.
Yes, so in terms of retail space, so going back to the kind of the point in the report about reference to policy 21, I think the policy doesn't identify the site as kind of a significant retail area, but it does acknowledge that there'll be some retail provision within major development sites. So, and it's considered that the kind of the proposed 200 square metre retail provision is sort of appropriate in that regard. So that would be sufficient for local shops and so on. With regards to the location of the retail sort of building, going back to Councillor Smith's point, I think this will be the intention is that this will be a separate building to the community building, but it would be in the same area, so it wouldn't be managed by the council. It would be a separate building, separately managed. But it is considered that sort of an appropriate location, as it would be a sort of a community hub with the community building. So having co-locating those uses in the same area would mean that's kind of a sort of focal point for the sort of the community. And so officers consider that sort of an acceptable location for the retail space. With regard to burial space provision, so the intention is that for that to be off-site. So I think Girton Parish currently have an intention to provide a new burial space within the parish. So I think it's a sort of civil burial ground near to, I think it's St Andrew's Church, and the idea is that the site would contribute towards that, provide a burial space serving the sort of the both Girton Village as it exists and also the Darren Green development. With regards to swimming pool contribution, so that is included in the EVS terms as references the sort of the indoor sport contribution. And there's, I think there's a number of other developments. So I believe Eddington and others also. There's other contributions looking to deliver sort of increased swimming capacity. So again, that'll be an off-site provision. With regards to whether roads are to be adopted, again, the sort of detail of that I think to some extent to be considered further through the design code and reserve matter stages, as the county council has sort of strict requirements in regard to making sure that with regard to whether they'll adopt roads or not, as members will be aware. So, but it's something we'll definitely look to consider further through the design code to to make sure that roads are provided to an adopted standard.
Thank you. I think that was it. Adoptable roads was the last one. Okay, thank you very much, Guy. So I'm going to come back to Councillor Porrer and Councillor Khan. Thank you for patience.
Thank you. I have some comments and then a couple of points that I'd like some action on if possible. I think, like Councillor Hawkins, I'm a little worried that we don't think we're going to get the extra access routes. I would certainly urge the developers to do their best before it comes back at Reserve Matters to have tried to resolve that. I think we have had previous where developers said, well, didn't want to sell, but we need a bit of proactivity there. I do share Councillor Thornborough's concerns with Anglian Water. We seem to be having the same issue that we have with Cambridge Water, but they keep having to say yes, even though we know it's adding more and more pressure, potentially more and more sewage into our rivers. So again, would welcome some more briefings on that. So I reiterate my point that I'm really disappointed that this is being pushed to appeal as well, because it seems to... But I'm treating that, I would like the suggestions I'm making to be included in the thing that goes to the inspector, please, on Wednesday. Because obviously, were we to agree some mitigation on the water, as Councillor Thornborough said, this could in effect be going through as an approve, not a reject. So, again, I have some concerns about the highways not adopting areas. I'd refer the developer to land north of Cherry Hinton, where we had a very good design code that did keep as much in the public ownership. And I'm also mindful, I think the government are saying that you can no longer have leasehold on properties that you buy, so that will affect it. And again, I would really like to make sure that's addressed at outline, not left to Reserve Matters. The bus route, I think, is really important. I'd really welcome something in the heads of terms to make absolutely clear that the bus route needs to be running, for example, before first occupation. So as we've said many times, if you don't have the public transport available at the beginning, people will have to buy cars. And then it's too late. And I think Councillor Smith picked up on that as well. Two things I would really like to ask for action on today. I think Councillor Hawkins and the Chair picked up on it. So normally there can be a restricted covenant saying no childcare use from your home. And I would like in the heads of terms something to reflect explicitly that that would be removed. Because I think often there's a no businesses from your home without planning permission. And I think what we're saying, what our various motions said was that should be something that isn't a standard thing. It's not a planning matter as such, so I think it would have to come through heads of terms, not through a condition.
An explicit exclusion for that purpose.
Yes, so saying that we would expect the heads of terms in the community. So, for example, the nursery, reference to nursery in the heads of terms and the early years provision to explicitly state that there shouldn't be a restricted covenant on, a small nursery business being run from home. And I think that was the gist of our motion at both councils. I'm hoping someone in South Cambs will nod as well.
County and South Cambs.
Yeah. The other thing, again, picking up on Councillor Smith's point, we have got some really good future-proofing conditions, so 33, 34, 32, 33 and 34, talk about M42, future space standards. I would like, for example, 17 and 48, the flood and the SUDS, cycle policy, biodiversity net gain, but particularly condition 40. So if we look at condition 40, we've got three parts. A has a lovely bit that says if future home standards change, we need to follow it. But B and C, which is water and overheating, doesn't have that. So I would like, with members' permission, to explicitly ask that B and C in condition 40 include, in effect, the same wording as in A, just appropriately tweaked to reflect the standard. And I'd also like officers to look at, I think, condition 38, which is biodiversity net gain, cycle parking 35, flood 17 and 48 SUDS, because those to me seem to be the ones where we hadn't got the future proofing in. And although I do appreciate there's some restrictions on how soon this will come forward, hopefully in the next few years, things will change quickly. And particularly that 110 litres. I do not want us building this out in 12 years, I think Councillor Smith has already said, and finding that we're stuck with it.
Councillor Porrer, and in fact, I will ask Councillor Smith to do the same, because you've both come out with a long list of suggestions. Can I ask that you just email officers,
Absolutely.
as I'm sure you've written them down?
Yes,
so
I
that,
have.
To ensure that those things are captured and not lost.
Yeah, so those are my comments, but the main one was condition 40 and others to future-proof them, please, and the heads of terms for child nursery provision.
Yep. Okay. Right. And Councillor Khan.
A number of issues, really. So first of all, in terms of the drainage, we've had problems in other areas where even with a suds drainage plan strategy which has been adopted, there have been problems. And I think the condition should ensure that there's a provision that if problems arise which are not foreseen, that the developer is obliged to resolve those. Otherwise, we have a problem that we can't, once the strategy has been approved, we can't approve it.
Before you go on, can I just check?
I want to check that that's the case.
Keith Barber, that we're able to do that, ask a developer to resolve an issue if it becomes...
It was done in the Cherry Hinton development.
Excuse me, after the development has been in working, as it were.
It very much depends where the ownership of the SUDS is to rest, because it would be with the owner of the facility or part of it, wherever the problem is.
I just comment that such a condition was included in the development at Cherry Hinton, so there must be provisions by which you can do it. The other aspect is I would also like to agree with Councillor Smith about that I'm very much in favour of the additional demolition condition which was added. I think that's a great help. As you've been aware, as I commented earlier, I was interested particularly in one derelict building which I thought was of interest, which is the only farmhouse in Impington Parish, Histon and Impington parishes, which derives from the actual enclosures. It was built during the enclosures. So it's got local historical interest and is obviously a potential asset. And in terms of the country park, there's a problem that I see that we're providing not just a local facility, but a regional facility. And this is being funded by the people on the development. There seems to be such inequality in terms of that. And somehow that we need to think about how that is managed in the future. I very much like the idea of the land trust taking over. I thought that, I mean, both the local community land trust, but also I'd never heard of the National Land Trust, and I looked up about it afterwards. It was developed when I was away abroad, so I didn't learn about it, even that was my interesting area. And it struck me as an interesting structure, so that was an interesting structure. But South Cambridgeshire is the only district in Cambridgeshire which does not have its own parks and open spaces service. And this is one thing that I've been going on about, I feel strongly about. I feel this is a missing. But we do need to, I think in future about how this is managed, who takes over, who takes the regional role. The design comments made by the design panel commented that the functions of the National Country Park need to be more widely, more developed, for longer, the sort of things that might be included. I mean, I had, for instance, been thinking about this, obviously it's my local area, that it would be a perfect location, for instance, for a city farm, which we don't have in this area. But the local community land trust is interested in the idea of what they call a make space, an art and crafts centre in that area. So there are lots of possibilities which may or may not be possible depending upon local interests. And I think we need to think about how that is managed and how the country park is managed, what role it's going to play, and what contributions are going to come towards that in the Section 106 and the future management. And we, South Cambs as a local authority, also needs to think about how its role goes and what its role will be. I mean, we've already imposed on the local residents in what are partly regional, widely ranged facilities in Camborne and particularly in Northstowe. So we do need to think about how and we will be, the same thing will arise in Waterbeach. We do need to think how we manage that and how that's taken on. And maybe we take that on board at this stage. I also thought in terms of the discussion of childcare, which I thoroughly agree with the points raised, but we ought to think also whether now, we're getting to a different stage, people are starting to work more at home, so we need to think about whether provision is provided for workspace in residential development. And perhaps with childcare, we need to think whether some of the houses perhaps ought to be designed with the idea in mind that they might be used for childcare in future. Maybe slightly larger areas where you can have young children kept than you would perhaps in a normal house. And maybe that needs to be thought of in the design code and the design at a later stage. So I think that's also a point that one needs to think. Also, you need to think about the management. They refer to the setting up of a new parish council. Now, that's not a given. I had a certain frustration with my own parish council because when they were discussed, asked for comments on it, they didn't comment on it because there's going to be a new parish council dealing with the area. I leave that where it is, but you know, it is in Impington Parish at the moment. And in fact, the issue about burial is also relevant because, in fact, virtually all the housing, maybe all the housing, is actually going to be in Impington Parish and not in Girton Parish. Ecclesiastical parish and at the present also the civil parish. We don't know what the future is going to be. We need to think about it. I think we do need to think about burial provision. There is not, to my knowledge, there isn't a great amount of space in Impington Parish burial ground. It's quite small. There's certainly not a lot of space left, and certainly not for 1,500 houses or 1,000 houses. So it is an issue, and I think they will need to think about provision of that within the Section 106 and how it's provided. So that's another issue that I think we ought to think about. Okay. Those are my concerns. In terms of the water, this has been coming a long time. It should have been dealt with 30 years ago. When I lived in the air sourced in 1975 to 75, there was problems then. There were problems with abstraction then. The levels were too low. This has been 50 years that we've had excessive abstraction. So at some point, it had to come to the fore. Maybe this is the way that it's brought to the fore, and at some point, somebody was going to refuse because there wasn't adequate access. We need to think of the future. We need to plan for the future. And maybe this will stimulate the necessary considerations in the future. I hope so.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Khan. You've made a number of points. I just want to pick up on one and ask for some advice from legal or Philippa Kelly. The point you made about long-term management of the country park. I say this because I'm a resident of Milton, and Milton Country Park is now in the ownership of a charitable trust. And I just wanted to ask you, what arrangements can we require with regard to long-term management of spaces which inevitably provide recreation and leisure for not only the immediate residents but also for the wider area, because the management of those is costly and it can require considerable, it requires income, which in Milton Country Park is largely provided by, we seem to have an interesting display on the screen. I don't think you mean to display that. Okay. Income for the country park at Milton is currently provided by the car park. And I'm not sure that is, we need to think in terms of more sustainable methods of income for our country parks, because they're important and supply a larger population than just the immediate population. So I can see you frantically looking for bits of paper.
Shall I try and deal with the question of the country park? And
yes, please.
How it
Keith
be
Barber,
funded? The heads of terms at page 111 do inform us that management and maintenance council, which has its own open space and parks division. Sorry, I thought I had switched it on. I don't need to start again, do I?
No. Just as far as it was proposed to be managed either through or and Cambridge City Council, the Land Trust, Wildlife Trust, and a management company. Yeah. And there was a possibility of the provision of an endowment to cover the ongoing management and maintenance costs.
Looking at a management company, there are two ways of doing that. It could be a private vehicle company set up to do it, for which residents would presumably, I stress the word presumably because this is very much up to the developer, be expected to contribute to some funds through a maintenance payment, service charge. Moving on to the provision of an endowment, well, that is a commuted sum. So were it to go to either of the options there, a commuted sum would be negotiated and paid over by the developer on transfer of the facilities. By that I mean the open space and the country park. Potential for this to be an interim measure until the formation of a parish council for Darwin Green. Dare I say that's a long way down the road. I think I've touched on that particular topic in a previous
Can I come back on the point that, again, this is a matter of providing a regional facility which you expect the parish council to pay for? And there are certain questions of equity in doing that, and whether it should perhaps be funded by a higher level structure or authority.
That's why I was asking.
And the other question, of course, is that you're talking about Cambridge City Council managing land which is actually in South Cambridgeshire. And so you have, there are issues here which perhaps need to be resolved.
Just one moment, Councillor Smith. What I asked originally was whether we could have advice about long-term management of a country park as a resource for more than just the immediate residents, and whether we can, would that be the endowment element, or would that be the management company element? How would that happen?
The management company, if it was something other than the two authorities, would have wide paths to raise funds. But if there is no provision within the sale documentation of the residential units that creates a service charge and being paid into it, that can't happen. So the detail needs much more exploration. And at the moment, you've got heads of terms which don't go into the minutiae of the detail.
I suppose what I wanted to ask was, can we be assured that the heads of terms will not constrain us from looking at other ways of this being managed long term?
I can't really answer that one way or the other. I mean, those things are still open to negotiation. So I think what we do is we take your thoughts away today, members, on where you're seeing those particular items going, and then it's down to officers to negotiate the 106 detail with the developer.
The reason being that it's a costly enterprise running a country park, and that shouldn't land on a parish council. Councillor Smith.
Could I just say before
sorry.
Councillor Smith comes in, is the suggestion about a future parish council taking it on is just that, it's future. So I think if it's vested in the city council or a management company or the Lands Trust, that will have overtaken that final limb that's there. I think what the case officer has tried to do in consultation with the applicant, or the appellant rather, is to cover off every eventuality. Of course, the bottom rung is that the developer is left with it. That the heads of terms don't envisage that. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yes, Chair. This is a really important issue. That we get the layout and the use and the development of the buildings or otherwise, the governance, the funding. We need to get all of this right. And I think this isn't something that can just be left to the officers to negotiate. This has got to be, we've got to have a transparent and accountable process that all of the community stakeholders are engaged in, all the parishes, the city council, residents and so on. This is too big a development to just deal with under heads of terms or through a bureaucratic process. So we need engagement, and that needs to be part of a feasibility study and a business plan. So it's very clear who's taking on the liability. Are those costs covered properly? There are precedents for this. Wildlife Trust did the deal with Grosvenor Estates over in Trumpington, which they then got a very long lease on the land, and so we need to follow that route to be sure that we don't end up with a country park that's neglected, not properly maintained, not properly used, because we didn't deal with the process correctly at this stage in the development process.
Thank you. I think I've just checked with Philippa Kelly, and it's already included in the heads of terms. Do you want to say anything about that, Philippa?
Well, I think the point I was going to make is that we are actively considering this as part of the Section 106 discussions. We will, obviously, we've heard what's been said today. We will take away those discussions to guide the future work the officers are doing, so we can note that and make sure that forms part of our future dialogue with the applicant.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thornborough.
Condition 42 is regarding road noise and refers to the noise emanating from the A14. We actually don't have an active congestion and traffic strategy reduction plan, for the county doesn't currently, and the amount of traffic in and around Cambridge is predicted to increase, and I think the mitigation of that of the noise from the A14 needs to be taken into account, not the situation now, but the situation going forward in the future. I don't know if that's possible.
And indeed, Councillor Thornborough, I was am mindful that the land to the east of here, along Orchard Park, is protected by attenuation barriers, noise attenuation barriers, and I wanted to check that was going to be included in this 42 condition. I just perhaps because it talks about the impact on residents, which of course are much further back. But as a regular walker in Milton Country Park, I know that the noise is quite intrusive in the country park itself. So I would like to see noise attenuation all along the A14 to protect the country park from noise. And I just wondered whether we could amend that condition to include that there should be noise attenuation barriers along the A14. Is that? Can
I finish what I was going to?
So just a moment. Can we amend the condition to, if members are happy with that, and I'll come back to Councillor Thornborough. Is that possible to do that?
Okay, so I think condition 42 is a technical condition that was recommended by the Environmental Health Officer, but that does, I know, relate to amenity and residential impact. Noting the concerns about the sort of future use and road noise, I think it's likely that the methodology would need to be agreed first with the Environmental Health Officer, but if that's not clear from that condition wording,
well,
then we could require...
42 and 43 both relate to noise as it impacts on buildings. And I want maybe an additional condition that says noise impacting on the country park.
I note that,
and the green space.
Yeah. I was just trying to deal with Councillor Thornborough's issue first, which is about future noise levels.
Yes,
and then
yes,
secondly, the
Anna show here. I mean, we've got a case officer. We should be referring to the case officer for answers to questions, surely.
I'm sure if Philippa Kelly felt it was appropriate for Guy to answer, then he will. I mean, so can we just clarify what we're doing? We're dealing with Councillor Thornborough's request about the future traffic levels and the noise implications of those. And the other question was about, can we protect the green space from noise as well? So
I hadn't actually finished my question about the noise condition.
Proceed.
So in South Trumpington, there are new homes which are quite close to the M11. And people need to understand about the noise attenuation design as part of the houses. So you can't just put new sockets in on this noise attenuated walls, and that's really, really important because the tiny hole and the noise can come through. So it's like informing people about passive homes. We need to inform people about the special designs of these attenuated walls somehow.
Really good point. Thank you very much. There's a principle, isn't there, in noise attenuation, that you do attenuation as close to the source of the noise as possible, but these are measures that are important in houses. Philippa, do you want to throw that to Guy? Or?
I could just finish off by advice in respect to condition 42. Following Councillor Thornborough's concerns about what is scoped into that noise assessment, we could expand the condition to require the methodology to be first submitted and signed off with the Environmental Health Officer first, which makes sure that potential future noise impacts are considered. I suppose I'm exercising caution about mitigation of noise on the country park in terms of what levels would be acceptable and how we would go about monitoring that and measuring that. It's something that we would potentially have to take away and have a think about, noting the concerns that have been raised today.
I'm happy that that matter should be taken away and considered and thought about, because if we're making green space as a place for people for relaxation and leisure, we also need to make them spaces that aren't noisy. Is that Councillor Thornborough?
There's another point. On the reason for refusal, 27, I wondered if we could add that it also conflicts with clause 157 of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. I think that's the correct clause number, but I think it's clause 157, I believe, and I would really value having that added as one of the references for reasons for refusal, because that reference undertakes to give protection to chalk streams. But I think we'd need to leave the wording to Keith to double check that if it's.
I think that's one of the elements that's coming back to Chair and Vice Chair anyway, if that's okay.
Yeah, I hear what Councillor Thornborough has said about section 157. We would need to check that it is actually enforced. The Act is now on statute book, but we don't know which bits of it, if any, have been brought into force. So we'll check that. But if it is enforced, then that's something which I'm sure...
It is enforced from Friday, I believe. The Act is law since Friday.
Thank you very much. Councillor Porrer.
Because I know the deadline, I think, for this is Wednesday, isn't it? Which is why we're having an urgent meeting. Can I just confirm that officers are happy to accept the check? Because obviously, I say some are coming back through chair and spoke, so I'm a little worried that's going to delay it. Because certainly for my arguments about the future proofing, I think Councillor Flaubert and others have mentioned conditions. I've written them down for officers. Can I make sure that they go in to these papers at appeal? Because my concern is if they don't, yeah, but I just wanted to check when we're talking about taking this away with officers. For these ones, I feel very strongly if members agree these should go in by Wednesday, because
yeah, we can
unless there's any valid reason not to. But I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
So, Guy, thank you very much. If you can respond to that, Guy.
Yes, so we can keep in note of the conditions, sort of it's just conditions, but yes, we can include those in our recommended conditions as part of the sort of appeal statement we submit on Wednesday. Obviously, the conditions themselves will be subject to negotiation discussion with the appellant, and then also be a matter for the inspector to determine whether or not to accept the conditions as recommended, or to seek to kind of change any conditions or not include them.
Can you clarify? Some of these conditions members obviously feel quite strongly about. I understand that conditions are subject to the, I have to say, I didn't realise before that conditions were subject to the approval of the applicant, or in this case, the appellant. Can you just clarify that point? So are there things that we might have asked and they could say no to?
Yes, so we will seek to agree conditions as far as possible with the appellant to sort of essentially reduce the point of disagreement with them and to aid the appeal process. But if there's any outstanding points or any conditions that members or the officers are recommending that the appellant don't agree to, then it will be a matter for the inspector to essentially to settle that disagreement.
That's fine, as long as they're recorded as things that we would wish for. Right, okay. So, I can't see anybody else wishing to contribute to the debate. So I think we perhaps ought to come to the recommendation. But there are a lot of adjustments which we might have wished to add to that. And I'm going to hand over to Philippa to describe the current version of the recommendation.
Right, no pressure, but I think I've captured everything here. So, Guy, I'm going to ask you if you could find the slide which had the updated officer recommendation, because there's an additional limb of paragraph C in addition to the recommendation that's set out on page 76 of your agenda, which is at paragraph or section 27. So there's A, B and C, the additional amendment there, which in essence delegates to officers in consultation with chair and vice chair the scheme of measures providing for and delivering enhanced water saving and other appropriate mitigation measures and the appropriate conditions which support and secure delivery of the scheme. There was also, in terms of updating the recommendation, the request for the reference to the levelling up bill and the relevant clause, which we believe is 157, but we will check that in relation to the protection of the chalk streams. And then if we look at the conditions which are currently being drawn up and which will be under further discussion with the applicant before they are then submitted to the planning inspectorate, in addition to the conditions as drafted and proposed in your agenda, the following updates have been suggested, which we will take away and work with potentially the applicant to see if we can come to a common agreement with regard to condition 9, which relates to the design code, and the timing. So we're looking at prior to submission of the first reserved matters application, not concurrently with. In relation to condition 26, which is tree protection, that condition to be expanded, or we include an additional condition regarding replacement planting within a period of time, I think 10, is it 5 or 10 years, 5 years as standard. We have condition 41, which is the BREEAM pre-assessment, pushing for ensuring that the school's construction is of the highest aspiration. And then we have proposed condition 60, which relates to gas boilers. I believe we were looking to delete that condition. We've then got, so I'm stepping back a bit, condition 42, which relates to noise attenuation for road traffic, to widen the scope of that condition so that the methodology for that assessment is first agreed by the council in association with consultation of the environmental health officer. And officers also note further consideration regarding noise attenuation in respect of the country park and appropriate mitigation. We're also going to take away and seek legal advice on the appropriate planning mechanism for exempting homeowners from any respective covenants regarding nursery and early years childcare facilities. And we're also going to review a number of relevant conditions relating to future reserved matters RMA parcels to ensure that they have regard to the regulations in place at that time. So in essence, future-proofing those future applications. There was a lot of discussion which we've noted around the 106 heads of terms and the clauses which obviously we would take away, including discussions on early trigger points for infrastructure, which we will consider in discussion with the relevant experts at the County Council, for example, the Education Authority, and further consideration of the Country Park long-term management and maintenance as well. But I think that captures all those key issues. But I'm sure you'll correct me if not.
I mentioned about SUDS and the fact that if the problems arise after, not just accepting the strategy, but if problems arise, resolving any problems, unexpected problems, as was done in, and you could refer to the Cherry Hinton development, which Felsted, I think it's called, development, which something was provided in that.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Can we do that as well? Yeah, so resolving problems in use by developer. Just one moment, please. Yes,
Just the
Councillor Park.
phasing of the bus route in the heads of terms to make sure it came in prior to occupation.
Right. Councillor Flobert?
Yeah, we also mentioned about the conditions 10 and 45.
Youth and play strategy, wasn't it?
Yes, thank you.
What was the actual issue there? Because there are conditions there already, aren't there? Where are they?
Is that to include reference to inclusive play? I think on the...
What was the...
Reference to inclusive play.
Inclusive, okay. Have we got everything, members? Right, good, okay. So, with those additions and adjustments, we come to the recommendation, do we not, members? Which is on page 76 of the agenda, with the additions that we've just had described to us. And the recommendation is that had the appeal against non-determination not been made, the council would have refused the planning application 22-02528 out for the following reasons. Can I ask members, if you agree with that recommendation, would you like to put your hands up now?
So, sorry, Chair, that's unanimous in favour.
Okay. Thank you. Does that, Keith, give us everything we need?
I hope so. It's been a long debate. I think we've scratched down 99.9% of what members have said. Thank you.
Had we not finished at that point, I would have stopped for lunch. So I'll let you all go and have some lunch. Oh, yes, and a reminder. Can you remind me the date? Oh, yes, 15th of November, members, our next Joint Development Control Committee. We will be at South Cambs Hall at Cambourne. Anybody who would like assistance with travel, either from a bus stop to the hall, please do get in touch with us and we can arrange that. And we look forward to seeing you there on the 15th of November. Thank you very much.